This is step 2. As we talked about at the beginning of the chapter, we talked about the 6 strategies to develop a well-managed and disciplined class. The last lecture was using proper teaching behaviors, which was step 1. Now we're going to discuss step 2 in great detail, defining class procedures, rules, and consequences. So on page 108, they talk about effectively managing is probably not probably, but it is dependent on your ability to articulate your expectations to the students. If you do not have guidelines or routines, then the students are going to have to guess what you're expecting from them every day. So on step number 1, you see here at the start of the school year, you want to determine routines for the students. They like structure and they want to have similarities so they don't have to guess what you want. On page 108, they talk about 7 routines that you as a teacher might want to decide about. Number 1, how are the students supposed to enter the teaching area? Are they going to line up and wait for you to have them come into the teaching area? Some schools, you have to go get them. But if you're the classroom teacher, you would be bringing the students outside. But what are you going to have them do? Or in the gym, wherever you're going to teach PE, are you going to have them line up? Are you going to have them just run around and start doing their intro activity right from the get-go, as you tell them when they're coming in, which would be very smart, and then have them line up into their PE lines? So how do you want them to enter the teaching area? The second routine that you might want to consider developing is how the teaching area is going to be defined. In a gymnasium, it's very easy to define the whole court, half a court. But what if you're outside? Are you going to have cones to designate the areas, or do you have a cemented area, pavilion? Number 3, where and how they should meet. In sitting squads, moving and freezing on a spot, in a semicircle, or so on. So where and how they should meet when you need to talk to them and you don't want them all scattered, what type of a routine do you want for there? Number 4, what they should do if the equipment is located in the area. Are you going to have them automatically put it in home position, or do you want them to explore and see what they can do with the piece of equipment? And some of these routines you'll realize as the year progresses, you may want to change it or modify it, or you may like what you're doing. Number 5, what signal is used to freeze the class? Are you going to say hands on knees, eyes on me? Are you going to say give me 5? Are you going to blow the whistle twice? What I picked up at the Lafer convention that I had forgotten about, but I like, they said if you can hear me, clap once, followed by if you can hear me, clap twice. Well, by the time everyone clapped once, if you didn't hear them, you knew what was following next. And so then everybody clapped twice, you knew to stop. And so it worked pretty well with the adults. Number 6, how they procure and put away equipment. Procure means how are you going to have the students get the equipment? This is one of the 12 statements I have you discuss on my self-evaluation form. So I want to know, how did you decide what students were going to get the equipment, and what did you do also to have the students put it away? Number 7, how will they be grouped for instruction? In the book, they talk about all different types of formations. They talk about shuttle formation, line and leader formation. You're very familiar with scattered formation. You're very familiar with the PE lines. So how would you have them group for instruction? These are some considerations that you may want to have for routines. They go on to explain how it's important for teachers to establish routines early in the school year and to review them as needed. You want to have structure. You want to have routines. Step number 2, determine your rules and procedures for the school year. Rules are an expected part of the school environment. Your administrators typically judge you as a teacher and how effective you are by how well you manage the students, rather than by how much you know about the subject matter. So it's very important that you can control your class, and that's how you manage your students. If you cannot manage your students, you cannot teach them. They can't learn. So when you're creating your rules, select general categories rather than specific behaviors. They give an example of respect your neighbor. That encompasses several areas. And you want to post these rules in the teaching area where all the students can easily read them. Some examples they give in the book: stop, look, and listen. They got to freeze to stop on signal. They need to look at you and then listen for the instructions, and you can't listen if you're talking. So that's a generic one. Take care of the equipment encompasses a broad area. Respect the rights of others. That's another one, kind of like the golden rule. It's difficult for the students to remember all the details of more than 3 to 4 general rules. Now, I'm talking about specific rules for your classroom. I'm not talking about the school's discipline plan. I'm talking about your rules in your classroom, how you want things done for your routines. So I want you to know, consider these following points when designing your rules. Number 1, select major categories of behavior rather than a multitude of specific rules. Number 2, identify observable behaviors. This makes it easy for you to determine whether a student is following your rules or not, and it's less subjective. Do your best is a common rule that is difficult, if not impossible, to determine, because how do you know if the student's doing his best or her best? Number 3, make your rules reasonable for the student's age level. Number 4, limit the number of rules. We talked about that already, 3 to 5 rules. Number 5, state your rules briefly and positively. So it's impossible to write a rule that covers all the situations, so make your rules brief but broad. Number 3, step number 3 up here on the PowerPoint talks about determining consequences when the rules are not followed. So when the rules are broken, students must learn to accept the consequences for their misbehavior. We have to teach our children that there are consequences. There are small consequences right now, and that's how we want to keep it. Because if they don't learn these small consequences now, later on in life, they're going to be huge, major consequences. So we need to teach our children, our students, that there are consequences for misbehavior. So we want to post these consequences for unacceptable behavior in the teaching area. Discuss your rules and consequences with them. Make sure they understand and see the need for the behavior guidelines. If you can get your students to agree on the rules and the consequences, that'll help the students to buy in on your philosophy. One of the best ways to earn their respect is to treat them all in a fair and caring way. Animosity occurs when students sense that you play favorites. In PE, common favored person is your gifted athlete, so try and be aware of this behavior and don't fall into that trap. When a student does choose to break a rule, apply the consequences without judging their character or making any type of derogatory statement. It's the misbehavior that you're addressing and not the student himself or herself. Step number 4, share your rules with parents, teachers, and administrators. Like the old saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, not just you, but also the parents and the administrators. I always sent home my rules and consequences and then had the parents sign the bottom of it and cut it and return that slip of paper to me. That way they still had a copy of my rules, guidelines, and so forth to refresh their memory. A newsletter to parents at the start of the school year explaining your program and your approach. I didn't go so far as I didn't go as far as the newsletter, but I had a sheet of paper. They also suggest sharing your rules with other teachers and administrators to help clarify your expectations. That'll help reinforce your approach to what's going on. Step number 5, have the class practice the rules. The rules stipulate expected behavior. Give them the opportunity to practice how you want the equipment handled. Is an example. It is common to hear teachers tell students, "How many times have I told you not to do that?" This statement assumes that telling them once will result in perfect adherence to the rules, but that's not the case. You need to continue to allow time for students to practice management behaviors. So this concludes step 2 of our process of developing a well-managed and disciplined class.